Right, people, chapter 21. Let's hope life gets better for Edward. The diner was called Neil's. The word was written in big red neon letters that flashed on and off. Inside it was warm and bright and smelt like fried chicken and toast and coffee. Bryce sat at the counter and put Edward on a stool next to him. He leaned the rabbit's forehead up against the counter so he would not fall. "What are you going to have, sugar?" the waitress said to Bryce. Give me some pancakes," said Bryce, "and some eggs, and I want steak too, and I want a big old steak, and some toast and some coffee." The waitress leaned forward and pulled at one of Edward's ears and pushed him backwards so that she could see his face. "This your rabbit?" she said to Bryce. "Yes'm. He's mine now. He belonged to my sister." Bryce wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "We're in show business, me and him." "Is that right?" said the waitress. She had a name tag on the front of her dress. Marlene, it said. She looked at Edward's face, and then she let go of his ear, and he fell forward, so his head rested against the counter again. "Go ahead, Marlene," thought Edward. "Push me around, do what you want. Doesn't matter. I am broken. Broken." The food came, and Bryce ate all of it without even looking up from his plate. "Well, you was hungry for sure," said Marlene as she cleaned away the plates. "I reckon show business is hard work." "Yes'm," said Bryce. Marlene tucked the bill under the coffee cup. Bryce picked it up, looked at it, and then shook his head. "I ain't got enough," he said to Edward. "Mom," he said to Marlene when she came back and filled up his coffee cup, "I ain't got enough." "What, sugar?" "I ain't got enough money." She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. "You are going to have to talk to Neil about that." Neil, it turned out, was both the owner and the cook. He was a large, red-haired, red-faced man who came out of the kitchen holding a spatula in one hand. "You came in here hungry, right?" he said to Bryce. "Yes, sir," said Bryce, and he wiped his nose at the back of his hand. "And you ordered some food, and I cooked it, and Marlene brought it to you, right?" "I reckon," said Bryce. "You reckon?" said Neil. He brought the spatula down on the counter with a thwack. Bryce jumped. Yes, sir. No, sir." "I cooked it for you," said Neil. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He picked Edward up off the stool and held him close. Everyone in the diner had stopped eating. They were all staring at the boy and the rabbit and Neil. Only Marlene looked away. "You ordered it. I cooked it. Marlene served it. You ate it. Now," said Neil, "I want my money." He tapped the spatula lightly on the counter. Bryce cleared his throat. You ever seen a rabbit dance?" he said. "How's that?" said Neil. You ever before in your life seen a rabbit dance?" Bryce set Edward on the floor and started pulling the strings attached to his feet, making him do a slow shuffle. He put his harmonica in his mouth and played a sad song that went along with the dance. Somebody laughed. Bryce took the harmonica out of his mouth and said, "He could dance some more if you want him to. He could dance to pay for what I ate." Neil stared at Bryce, and then, without warning, he reached down and grabbed hold of Edward. "This is what I think of dancing rabbits," said Neil, and he swung Edward by his feet, swung him over his head so hard that his head hit the edge of the counter. There was a large crack. Bryce screamed, and the world, Edward's world, went black. Chapter 20. It was dusk, and Edward was walking along the pavement. He was walking on his own, putting one foot in front of the other, without any assistance from anybody, and he was wearing a very fine suit made of red silk. He walked along the pavement, and then he turned onto a path that led up to a house with lighted windows. I know this house, thought Edward. This is Abeline's house. I'm on Egypt Street. Lucy came running out of the front door of the house, barking and jumping and wagging her tail. Down, girl, said a deep, gruff voice. Edward looked up, and there was Bull standing at the door. Hello, Marlene, said Bull. Good. Oh, rabbit pie, we've been waiting for you. And Bull swung the door wide, and Edward walked inside. Abeline was there, and Nellie, and Lawrence, and Bryce. Susanna! Cried Nellie. Jangles, said Bryce. Edward, said Abeline, and she held out her arms to him. But Edward stood still. He looked around the room. You searching for Sarah Ruth? Bryce asked. Edward nodded. You've got to go outside if you want to see Sarah Ruth, said Bryce. So they all went outside. Lucy and Bull and Nellie and Lawrence and Bryce and Abeline and Edward. Right there, said Bryce, and he pointed up at the stars. Yep, said Lawrence. That is the Sarah Ruth constellation. He picked Edward up and put him on his shoulder. You can see it right there. Edward felt a pang of sorrow, deep and sweet and familiar. Why did she have to be so far away? If only I had wings, he thought, I could fly to her. Out of the corner of his eye, the rabbit saw something flutter. Edward looked over his shoulder, and there they were, the most magnificent wings he had ever seen, orange and red and blue and yellow, and they were on his back. They belonged to him. They were his wings. What a wonderful night this was. He was walking on his own. He had an elegant new suit, and now he had wings. He could fly anywhere, do anything. Why had he never realised it before? His heart soared inside of him. He spread his wings and flew off Lawrence's shoulder, out of his hands and up into the nighttime sky towards the stars, towards Sarah Ruth. No, shouted Abeline. Catch him, said Bryce. Edward flew higher. Lucy barked. Malone, shouted Bull, and with a terrific lunge he grabbed hold of Edward's feet and pulled him out of the sky and wrestled him to the earth. You can't go yet, said Bull. Stay with us, said Abeline. Edward beat his wings, but it was no use. Bull held him firmly to the ground. Stay with us, repeated Abeline. Edward wanted to cry, and he started to cry. I can't stand to lose him again, said Nellie. Neither could I, said Abeline. It will break my heart. Lucy bent her face to Edward's, and she licked his tears away. There he is. What happens next? We're about to find out. Exceedingly well made, said the man, who was running a warm, damp cloth over Edward's face. A work of art, I would say. A surpassing, unbelievable, dirty work of art. But art nonetheless. The dirt can be dealt with, just as your broken head can be dealt with. Edward looked into the eyes of the man. Ah, there you are, the man said. I can see that you are listening now. Your head was broken. I fixed it. I brought you back from the world of the dead. My heart, thought Edward. My heart is broken. No need to thank me, the man said. It's my job, quite literally. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Lucius Clark, doll mender. Your head, may I tell you. Will it upset you? Well, I always say that the truth must be met head on, no pun intended. Your head, young sir, was in 21 pieces. 21 pieces? Edward repeated mindlessly. Lucius Clark nodded. 21, he said. All modesty aside, I must admit that a lesser doll-maker without my skills, might not have been able to rescue you. But let's not speak of what might have been. Let us speak instead of what is. You are whole. You have been pulled back from the brink of oblivion by your humble servant, Lucius Clark. And here Lucius Clark put his hand on his chest and bowed deeply over Edward. And this was quite a speech to wake up to, and Edward lay on his back trying to absorb it. He was on a wooden table. He was in a room with sunshine pouring in from high windows. His head, apparently, had been in 21 pieces and was now put back together into one. He was not wearing a red suit. In fact, he had no clothes on at all. He was naked again, and he did not have wings. And then he remembered Bryce, the diner, and Neil swinging him through the air. Bryce. You are wondering, perhaps, about your young friend, said Lucius, the one with a continuous runny nose. Yes, he brought you in here, weeping, begging for my assistance. Put him together again, he said. Put him back together. I told him. I said, young sir, I am a businessman. I can put your rabbit back together again for a price. The question is, can you pay the price? He could not. Of course he could not. And he said that he could not. I told him that he had two options. Only two. The first option being that he seek assistance elsewhere. Option 2 was that I would fix you to the very best of my considerable abilities, and then you would become mine. His no longer, but mine. Here Lucius fell silent. He nodded, agreeing with himself. 2 options only, and your friend chose option 2. He gave you up so you could be healed. Extraordinary, really. Bryce, thought Edward. Lucius Clark clapped his hands together. But no worries, my friend, no worries. I fully intend to keep my side of the bargain. I will restore you to what I perceive to be your former glory. You shall have rabbit fur ears and a rabbit fur tail. Your whiskers will be repaired and replaced. Your eyes repainted to a bright, stunning blue, and you will be clothed in the finest of suits. And then someday I shall reap the return of my investment in you. All in good time, all in good time. In the doll business, we have a saying. There is a real time and there is doll time. And you, my fine friend, have entered doll time. And that is where we're going to leave Edward. See you tomorrow. Bye.